Today I'm speaking with Sinane Shea. Sinane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for talking to me. This is very exciting.
Absolutely. And just to give a brief bio for Sinane, I don't know her at all, so we're going to get to know her together. But she's from Florida, but she now lives in Charleston, South Carolina, which is on my bucket list of places to go visit. So cool places there. She studied nuclear engineering at the University of Florida, which just blows me away at the level of knowledge it must take to study that. She's a civilian contractor for the Navy. She has a non-denominational Christian background with a few interesting sidebars that we're going to jump into. And she's working on a book about Kanan, white Christian nationalism, cults, and other related topics. Her website for that is takingoffthetinfoilhat.com. That's a great title. So if you could tell us more about yourself and tell us something fun or quirky about your or a hobby or something like that.
I am from Florida. So I have a thorough background in just absolutely bonkers bananas. And I am now living in South Carolina, so out of the frying pan into the fire, so to say. And we are, I'm writing my book and I'm also renovating our house. So
Nice.
I am quite friendly with a miter saw and we are very busy. So
That's awesome. I used to be a custom cabinet maker, so now some of those skills that you require. What's the long-term goal? Like how many months or years left do you have before you're at a good spot with it?
oh my God, we've been working on this for like 2 or 3 years at this point. Like replaced all the floors, scraped all the popcorn off the ceilings, did some, wiring and stuff. So right now, all we have left is the kitchen, which we have to make all the cabinets for. So, come visit anytime, and the master bathroom. So of course, the two biggest, most expensive projects.
Yeah, exactly. I love that when you do all that kind of stuff yourself. It's so nice to be able to customize it and have cabinets that are built in that look like they were built into the walls. It's so cool, and of course to be able to finish it. I do miss honestly the having a nice finishing area. We used to spray lacquer, and when you were done, it was like a sheet of glass. It was so beautiful. Anyway, well, we're here to hear your story. Obviously, we want to talk about the book at some point later, but if you could, I'd love to hear people's stories. We love to invite people on this channel to just take us back to the earliest days. Like, how did you get exposed to Christianity in the first place? What was your upbringing like? What were the earlier messages? And just walk us through it, and I'll jump with a few questions here or there.
So, I was raised in kind of, I call it basic bitch Christianity, Protestantism, non-denominational. The church that we went to growing up was a Calvary Chapel, which is kind of like the Starbucks of non-denominational churches because it's like this huge chain. They
Yep.
have like over 1,800 denomination or churches like globally. They started in Southern California, as all of these things do. And when it first started, when I was really little, it was the type of church that loved to talk about how they were mimicking the early church and they didn't have a building. And so we would meet in like school cafeterias or like a furniture store or like any, kind of space that would allow us to take over for Sundays.
Hmm.
And then as I got older, they found some more permanent spaces. They found a church that I think they leased and then now they own, and they've like built onto it. And it's truly a wannabe mega church. I'm from a very small town in Florida, so I don't know that they'll ever hit like true mega church status, but they're as close as they can get. And it's really interesting to have seen my generation. The pastor had four sons, and of course they all kind of got hired into the church as like the youth minister and the worship minister and like all these things. And as they've kind of taken over a little bit. The youth program has exploded, and they have, like the aesthetics and like the cool kid church kind of thing that like all the mega churches really have. So that was where my family predominantly went to church growing up. And it was non-denominational, but like at least in my experience, non-denominational really just means like Southern Baptist theology with like board shorts
Yeah.
and like rock music. And then my family also put us in a private Christian school that was a different non-denominational church. So I was in a private Christian school from kindergarten through eighth grade, and it was literally just a white Christian nationalist indoctrination camp.
Mm.
It was obviously a Christian school, but like there was also this like huge element of nationalism, American exceptionalism. The mascot were the Patriots, like 1776, like Revolutionary War patriots. They were obsessed with the founding fathers and
Mm.
the Pilgrims. And we had like a Plymouth Day every year where all of the kids had to either dress up as pilgrims or like wildly racist Native American costumes. Um, we learned like just straight up propaganda that nothing about the actual history of Native Americans in this country, nothing about the fact that the founding fathers were not evangelical Christians, um, just literally lies, and just baked in from kindergarten on. You don't know any
Mm.
better. It's staggering. And then
I can just add one comment. My
yeah,
my school's mascot was the Crusaders, which is I feel like just as bad. It's like, do you
that
not
might be worse.
do you not see the problem here?
Oh no. That's awful. So I say that kind of like my upbringing had like three spheres of influence. Like one was the Calvary Chapel, one was this private Christian school, and the third one was an honest to goodness Southern Baptist church that like my older relatives attended on Sundays. And then I started going there for youth group, like Wednesday night or Thursday night youth group. Once I reached like middle and high school age because my best friend, her family went to that church. So I just went there for youth group. And um, growing up, it wasn't until much later that I realized that all three of these circles overlapped. And like people who went to the school, went to the Calvary Chapel, went to the youth group, like there was a lot of overlap. It's kind of a small town, about 16,000 people for an actual number. And there was a very strong IBLP cult influence. The Institute in Basic Life Principles was a cult started, I want to say in like the, I don't know, 60s to 80s. I don't know when it started, but it was by a reverend named Bill Gothard. There's a Shiny Happy People documentary on Amazon Prime, which is incredible. And I was not in IBLP, but everyone that I knew was involved with them. So like there was just a
Mm.
lot of like it was in the water. And for anybody who doesn't know, this is like hyper purity culture, hyper patriarchy. Like women are you can't wear more than two finger widths below your collarbones, you can't show your shoulders. Some of them like say like not even pants, you have to wear skirts like to your ankles. This is the Duggar family, 19 kids and counting. Their whole shtick is that they believe in no birth control, have as many children as God will bless you with.
Right.
And so I knew a bunch of families growing up that had like 6 to 8 kids. And you know how the Duggars were like Jenna, Jesse, Janice, like whatever, JJ, like I don't know, maybe it was just like a popular 90s thing, but a bunch of families like were all named like, you know, TTTT or like CCCC. Ugh. And so lots of like big families like that. Lots of these were I remember seeing Bill Gothard like VHS tapes, sermons like in my friend's house, in my best friend's house. Not knowing what or who that was. Like I just thought he was like another preacher. Like there were bajillions of uh pastor VHS tapes and sermons and things that we were constantly being like told to watch and stuff. And all of the girls that I grew up with, like all of them, were going to IBLP summer camps. And I was invited when I was like, I want to say 12, the summer that I was 12. My best friend, we'll call her Kathy, invited me. And she was going, two girls from the Calvary Chapel were going. A girl from the school was going. Two sisters from the school that I knew were going. Like I didn't know that many people, and everyone was going. And Kathy sold it to me as, "Oh, you get to learn how to cook and clean and sew." And those are all good things to know how to do. I at least like to, sew and cook, but the kicker, the line in the sand for me was the dress code. She said that the dress code was floor length skirts. And I am a 12-year-old in Florida who just assumes that the entire world is constantly 105 degrees. And I was like, you're not putting me in a floor length skirt. Like, I will die. And so I didn't go. And my mom asked me, like, oh, do you want to go? All your friends are going. And I was like, no. And she was just like, okay, good. And like that was the end of it. She didn't push it because my family was not involved in IBLP at all. I don't really know that they knew how prevalent it was or what was really going on. But those moms, all of my friends' moms, all of my friends' families, like those were the ones who were teaching at my private Christian school and running our like weekend Bible camps and like whose houses I was sleeping over at and stuff. So you can't get rid of that influence, right? And
Yeah.
and and it's the sort of ideology that literally taught that like women are physically, mentally, and in every way spiritually inferior to men, that women are not encouraged for higher education. If anybody that I knew like did go for higher education, it was to a Bible college. A lot of kids ended up going to Liberty University, which is Jerry Falwell's indoctrination camp in Virginia. And there were a couple like Christian schools in Florida that people went to. And um, I was in kind of a unique situation from the rest of my friends because my family was in this. They put us in this private Christian school. They were like, very staunch evangelicals, wanted to raise us up right, that kind of thing. But my mom was not like the other moms. She had moved out when she was like 17 on her own, lived kind of a whole super hyper independent life. It has been proposed to like 8 times or something ridiculous. And my dad was very similar, like very independent, traveled the world surfing and stuff. And um, I think that they were raised Christian, probably like evangelical. I don't really know, but and I don't know that they were ever like atheists or anything. I think that it was just like after they had kids, they decided they needed to get more serious about it.
Mm.
And, but because my mom had life experience that a lot of my friends' moms like did not have, they all got married when they were 19. They, raised my generation the way that they had been raised. Um, my mom knew women who had been in abusive relationships. My mom had seen, people, women be abandoned, be abused, like beaten, that sort of thing. And so she had just enough outside influence to tell me, like, basically, never trust a man. like you should still find your biblical God sent husband. Like God is going to send you the spiritual leader for your home and your life. However, you should at least like have a degree, like just have something to fall back on. You can be married for 15 years and have 3 kids and he can leave you. So like just, have a backup plan, but like trust God, so there was a
Mm.
lot of cognitive dissonance. But I didn't realize that this was a message that none of my friends were getting. And, so they told me like, be good at school. And I was naturally kind of bent like that anyway, and was convinced that colleges were going to be like inspecting my kindergarten transcripts. So, I took it very seriously. I was very good at math. And, so I got to one, go to a real high school because the private Christian school that I went to was uh they just kind of made it up as they went along. And
Yeah.
like they had somebody's dad who was a medical doctor teaching science in like 10th grade. Um, and my I think my family recognized that I like if I was going to go to college, they just they couldn't offer me what I needed. So I got to go to like a kind of a real high school, and then I got to go to a public secular university, the University of Florida.
Mm.
Um,
Can I take us back a few steps?
Yeah.
I was curious. I definitely get a good picture of some of the influences that were kind of happening in your church and your circle. But at what point did you get exposed to the pure message of the gospel? Like, did you ever get that message from church that you needed Jesus as your savior? And
Oh
was there a
yeah.
point at which you placed your faith in Christ?
Yes, absolutely. So I was one of the ones who like never didn't believe. I had been exposed to the gospel and to that, Jesus loves me and that Jesus died on the cross for me and that like I'm a sinner who needs like salvation, like from before I could like walk, talk, read, or think. So I didn't have like a rapturous born again experience because I was raised in it from birth. Like I just always believed that. I was baptized for the first time when I want to say 8 years old. Um, and then I want to say when I was like about 18, 19, I got baptized again just because I just feel like every evangelical that you talk to, I prayed the sinner's prayer like every night before bed, like just begging Jesus to like forgive me for all of my like horrendous like 8-year-old sins. And trying to think of all of the things that I had done wrong that day and like asking forgiveness for each one and like worrying that if I missed one, then like, maybe that meant I wasn't saved or like instead of seeing, monsters in the closet or under the bed, I would think that like the shadows at night were demons. And then I would worry that like if I'm seeing demons, like demons are not supposed to have any power over somebody who's saved. So maybe that means I'm not saved. And every time I lost my mom in a grocery store, I was terrified that the rapture had happened. Like, God forbid I hear like a horn or a trumpet, because like that was the rapture. And I remember like several very distinct memories. I'm not sure exactly how old I was, but I was very little, like maybe 6 to 10. My mom telling me like basically and teaching me biblical inerrancy, saying that like the word of God, the Bible is the word of God, and this is like the absolute pure true answer to everything, and that you should never question it, and that there are going to be false prophets who are going to try to lead you astray, and you can always tell that they're false prophets by turning back to the word of God. And then when I was like 10 to 12, like her telling me that like the rapture is happening in her lifetime because she had interpreted some biblical prophecy, I think because of Israel being reestablished as a nation in like the 1940s, that like her generation was the one that Jesus was going to come back for. So I needed to be ready for that. And so like a lot of rapture anxiety, a lot of salvation anxiety. I got rebaptized again when I was like 18 or 19 because I was just like, well, maybe I didn't really know what I was doing as an 8-year-old. So let's just like cover those bases.
Well, can I ask
I
in terms of the like not just the professions, but could you talk about maybe what was it like behind the scenes, not where what people asked you to believe, but like when you were just say you're laying on your bed at night with an open Bible and just talking to God, no expectations of hey, do you believe this? Do you believe that? Do you acknowledge this? Do you agree with this one that? Just you and God. What was it like with your quiet time with the Lord?
um yeah, I tried to read my Bible every night, or like as often as I could. And I, never really doubted anything. Like I never had any like problems with that. Like I would have emotional worship experiences and things at church, like really think that like, maybe this is the Holy Spirit. But I also think that I've always just been, I really revered God, and the idea of the Holy Spirit and the theology and things that I was taught. So I was always very hesitant to say like, oh, that was the Holy Spirit, because I was like, who am I to say? Maybe
Yeah.
like I would think that like, like and when people would say that like God told them things or like the Holy Spirit did this or that, like generally I would believe them, or like believe that it was possible, but and it wasn't because I was doubting or because I thought that they were like wrong. It was just because I respected it so much that I took it very seriously. I did not lightly throw around that something was the Holy Spirit or
Mm.
was God speaking to somebody, you know.
I had that very same conviction very strongly. I even had
Yeah.
a elder in our church ask me, "What is God saying to you?" And I was
Mhm.
like, I struggle with that because he was like, I was going the route you were saying, like, do you mean like what is he saying to us all in the scriptures? He's like, no, no, what is he saying specifically to you? I was like, and we went back and forth for a while in the conversation, like, do you mean specifically like to me and no one else? Like, what is it? And he's like, yeah, what is God's? You want to be a pastor, right? Clearly, if you want to be a pastor, you need to be open, very open dialogue with the Lord. What has He been saying to you that He's not saying to anyone else? And I had
Mhm.
to conclude, like, based on what I think you're asking me, I don't think I've ever heard God speak directly to just me.
Mhm.
And he was like, what? So it was really weird. But I was like in that same frame of mind of like, I don't want to start assuming that my sense of my the Bible clearly says don't lean on your own understanding,
Mhm.
trust in the Lord. Like I don't want to think that my intuition is the same thing as the Spirit. So I had that same conviction. But did you feel close to the Lord at all? Like when you mentioned worship, but did you feel like He was in some way leading your life and that He was your certainly your best friend, but in a bigger picture He was also just your champion. He was the lover of your soul. Did that part seem to make a difference over the years as you thought through the kind of the implications of the doctrines of grace?
Yeah. So, I had a lot of those anxieties and things, but at the same, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance. You have like you're terrified of hell and that you're not doing enough and that you're not actually saved and that you're leaning on your own understanding and all of these things. Or on Judgment Day, Jesus will say what turn away from me, I never knew you, or whatever it is. But at the same time, yes, like I did feel close to God. I had a relationship with Jesus Christ. He lived in my heart. Like I I thought that he had a plan for my life and that he was directing my life and that I was trying to live according to God's will. And it's exactly as you're saying, like what is God saying to you kind of thing. Like and this is like a big thing, especially for like 18-year-olds who are about to go to, for me, I was potentially going to go to college, which is not something that a lot of people in my world did. Um, you know, People were just saying like, oh, well, like pray about like what the Lord's will for your life is. Like, does God want you to go to college? Is that your calling and that sort of thing? And again, just like agonizingly like compulsively praying that God would like show me his will, tell me, speak to me, say what he wanted me to do, like. And eventually, because you don't actually hear anything, you just kind of like, if I get into college, then that's God's will, or and I think that, and I don't know what it was that maybe stopped me from, I feel like it was reverence and that it was respect that stopped me from saying like this is God's will, this is what God said. But I think that that's also something that like was a hindrance to the indoctrination because I just think that if you confuse your thoughts for like God's thoughts, you're in a way that was even more than I was in. And I'm hesitant to say like, oh, I didn't know the Holy Spirit or I didn't hear God speak to me, because then, Christians and evangelicals are going to say, well, then, oh, that's proof that you never had the Holy Spirit. That's proof that you were never truly saved after all, and do the whole no true Scotsman thing. But like I had it as much as
Mm.
anybody else, I'm convinced. And and I remember one time when I was like 14 years old, I went to a summer Bible camp because that's what we did every single summer. And like every waking opportunity, I was sent off to some sort of like, Jesus camp. And of course, they do the big emotional like altar call nights, and we different rituals about like writing down your sins and then like putting them into a fire or stuff like that. And like, trying to get all of these kids to like give their lives to Jesus as if they weren't all already Christians to begin with. Maybe it is, because I'm an engineer or like whatever it is, but like I didn't like to get too swept away with the emotion of things, because it felt like disingenuous, like it felt manipulative almost. And
Mm.
on the second or third night of these like very highly emotional altar calls, like everyone is crying, like everybody is crying. They're having these like deeply emotional um experiences. And I was like, okay, like this is it, this is happening. And I was crying, and they had adults who, looking back, were probably like 19 years old, like standing at the front waiting for people to come up and like pray with you. And so I was like, okay. And so I went up and I talked to one of these women, and I just remember them asking me, like, why are you crying? Like, oh, like, why are you crying? And I didn't have an answer. I was like, I thought that this was like where you told me that. All right. Like, I thought this is what we were supposed to be doing.
Do you think they
Um,
were assuming you were trying to confess some big sin?
yeah, I think that maybe they were, just and like and knowing what I know now, like, forced confession is like a huge thought reform like tactic. But and I was just like, they were like, oh, like this is the Holy Spirit and stuff. And I was like 14 years old, and I remember thinking like, is it though? Like, no. I was like, I'm pretty sure that this was just emotional manipulation. And I was like, I will never let this happen again. And,
Mm. That's really
and
astute at that age to pick up on that.
well, I don't think that I necessarily had the words for it. It felt icky. And I was like, I'm not going to do this again. Like, unless
Mm.
I know that it is like something supernatural. I'm not going to get like swept away in the emotions of things, because it felt disrespectful and like heretical.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting that you bring that
so
up. I haven't heard too many people bring this part of the story up, but it's a great point. I can relate to it a lot. I think that was because there was a lot of pressure to like have a mountaintop experience. It's like if God is working in you, transforming you, revealing your sins, revealing the impurities, making you turn away from your selfishness, making you much more willing to love Him and obey Him and be a vessel that He can use and glory, just shine for Him. You're going to feel emotionally moved and charged. You are going to have these mountaintop experiences, not because you want to create something fake, but because you're standing, as it were, in the presence of God. It's like Moses' face shone when he went into God's presence. Like you're going to shine because you're in a sense metaphorically entering God's presence, and yet that side that you're talking about is like the rationality. Like, what if you're just creating an atmosphere? And I felt that less in those contexts at summer camp because it was like it was people I trusted. But where I had struggles with that exact same issue was at the larger concerts. Like I remember it was like it was Newsboys. Do you know that name?
mhm.
Newsboys and someone else, and then Josh McDowell was the big speaker. He spoke for a while about how to make sure you don't have sex before you get married. But like I remember the Newsboys, like I love their music, but I remember thinking this exact same thought of like it's kind of creating this like you just feel like you're tingling, like you have goosebumps all over your body. It's like, is that the spirit, or is that just would any kind of if I was at a rock concert for a secular group, would it do the same thing? And I had the same concerns, but it was like this pressure, I think, in the church to have to give people these experiences. And so we were kind of like slowly drifting toward a more experiential dynamic, while
Mhm.
the more Calvinistic side of me, which was I was getting a lot of reformed, strict teaching. It was more like the teaching was saying, don't go towards your emotions. The church experience was saying, your emotions are a big part of this. And I remember feeling like I was in two different worlds. It's crazy how it works.
Mhm. And yeah, and again, knowing what I know now, if you read books by like Dr. Margaret Singer or Dr. Janja Lalich, they wrote one book called Cults in Our Midst, and they talk about, Dr. Robert J. Lipton talks about like mystic manipulation. And then I don't know if they have it, Dr. Singer has a term for it, but basically reinterpreting physical experiences with divine significance. So when you get goosebumps, saying that that's the Holy Spirit, when actually it's just music, and you can get that at like a Creed concert or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And or like, the same thing though happens in what evangelicals and Christians would definitely call cults with the new age experience of meditation and like she gives the example of hyperventilation. If you chant, it basically is a form of hyperventilation if you do this for like hours on end, and it causes physical like experiences, like oxygen deprivation and things, and just exhaustion. And then they reinterpret those physical reactions as like, oh, that's you reaching an enlightened state, or that's the
Mm.
Holy Spirit. So, yeah, again, like knowing what I know now, it's just like, oh, no, I was right. I was being manipulated. But as a 14-year-old who's being told that, like, this is the Holy Spirit and your eternal salvation hinges on you having this emotional experience, it's just nothing but fear.
Yeah. I'm just curious if you were back putting yourself back in those days in those shoes when you would have absolutely said, this is not just what I've been told, but I definitely believe it. If someone had come to you, say between the ages of 14 and 16 or so, and said, "Hey, I'm not a Christian, but I know you are, and I'm beginning to wonder if I need to reconsider my worldview. Just what do you believe?" And if they were to be more specific and say, "I've heard you all use the phrase having peace with God." And I know you talk about sin, but according to you, what does it mean to have peace with God? And how do I become a Christian if I wanted to? What would you
Mhm.
have told your friend in that conversation? What is the gospel?
One, I would have been just thrilled at the opportunity. Two, I would have been terrified that I was going to mess it up. And I probably would have frantically been praying, like, Holy Spirit, like, give me the magical words that are going to convert this person. Cause you're told that, like, God will like give you the magical words that are perfect for this person to hear. And then, I would have tried to explain, like, you're not a Christian, I'm a Christian. You need to have Jesus died on the cross for your sins. We are all sinners and are separated from God because he is both perfect, loving, and just. And that Jesus's sacrifice bridged the gap. And that if you just pray the sinner's prayer, which is not in the Bible, and ask him to forgive your sins, repent of your sins, uh, start a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and invite him to live in your heart, then you will be forgiven of your sins, washed white as snow, and your name will be written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and you will live in heaven with him for eternity. And that, specifically if you're worried about like God's peace, that like if you do this and you convert and you believe in Jesus as your personal savior, like he will give you you'll peace beyond understanding, and that basically like you don't have to live in like fear and doubt anymore, and that is God's peace. um
Hmm.
Me
And
being a borderline teenager with zero life experience, and uh not understanding, not having had any experience outside of evangelicalism, and realizing that piece is probably like the most anxious and terrified I've ever been. So
I was going to say, if you're in a church service at that point, you're hoping that they start playing "Just as I Am" a few hundred times. That's amazing. You definitely echoed the kind of sentiment I would have said about how to have peace with God, and not just in the sense of the emotional peace, but just the peace in the sense that God is at enmity with us. He's at war with us because of our sin, and he sees us as his enemy of his holiness. But that in a sense, he kind of made Christ his enemy temporarily on our behalf and punished him instead of us. So when you, in that context, though, you clearly believed that you were profoundly a sinner, profoundly wicked and deserving.
Yep.
Did you struggle at all with self-esteem, just with these messages of like, oh my gosh, I'm really wicked, and especially maybe puberty, if that adds a worse dynamic to it, but just even before then, just the sense of I'm being told that I'm my righteousness is like a filthy rag. I'm being told that I'm so bad, someone had to be tortured for me. Like that's how bad. And he
Mhm.
would have, if it was just me in the garden and I alone had sinned, he would have had to die, and he would have had to die a violent, bloody death just for me. And he would have done it. I'm that bad. Like, where was your self-esteem throughout those years?
I don't really know exactly to call it self-esteem, but like I definitely believed that like I was inherently evil, sinful, left to my own devices and nature, that I would just be this horribly depraved person. And, I was, like I said, like, I would just end every night praying, like, please forgive me for all the horrible things that I've done. Even, and like, if I couldn't think of anything horrible that I've done, then like, that's proof that that I am horrible because I can't even think of the things that I did. And I must, um, you know, like I don't even recognize evil as evil. That's how evil I am. And like even the Bible says to pray without ceasing, and I was like, well, I definitely ceased praying at various points throughout the day, so like that's a crime. And I think it was wrapped up, like everything, it's all very intermixed. Nothing's in a vacuum. Very wrapped up with purity culture. All and like I didn't have a boyfriend. I wasn't allowed to. I didn't date. I didn't have a boyfriend until like my senior year of college. And like I had never held a boy's hand. And I was from Florida, so I wore a two-piece bathing suit, and I was like my parents let me wear two-piece bathing suits where most of my friends like were not allowed to do that. And so I was like a Jezebel. And so like that kind of shame and guilt wrapped up into it.
Can I ask about the boyfriend situation? Were you purposefully trying to go for that kind of golden ideal of like we don't even kiss until our wedding day? Was it that intense, or like where were you with that?
Personally, I was not. Um, a lot of my friends got married right after high school when we were like 19 to 21 years old. And a lot of them, I went to a lot of weddings that were both dry and where their first kiss was at the altar. And I never had made that commitment. Like I didn't want that because it was awkward and gross. But I definitely was like for saving myself for marriage, and like it didn't look nice going to those weddings. So and I was always kind of the opinion too of like, we were taught that, you know, again, in the IBLP influenced purity culture, that like dating is sinful. You have to court, and that your like parents are involved. And like, I definitely knew some girls whose parents literally like picked their spouse for them.
Ooh.
And not that they like, were married against their will or anything, but
Like
it's all very,
heavy interview process.
it's much more subtle than I
Yeah.
think people on the outside would realize. And then so like courting was okay, dating was evil. um I think that I have a hard time personally separating like what was purity culture and what was maybe just my family's personal dysfunction. And like there's definitely some overlap there, but my family were very controlling. When I did start dating my now husband, who was my first boyfriend, um, he's Catholic. And as you can imagine, that was a nightmare. My um, mother basically told me that I was going to have to stand before Jesus on Judgment Day for this, and basically saying that I was going to go to hell because I was dating my husband. Implied that he and all of his friends were going to I don't know how else to say this, gang rape me. And just constantly telling me that like he's cheating on you. Like, how do you know he's not cheating on you? And it was honestly just like harassment. And it was because there's this cognitive dissonance of her wanting me to be independent and to have an education and something to fall back on for myself, but at the same time, her seeing all of my friends with their parents picking their husbands, thinking that she's going to get to do that too. And like when I'm 23 years old and I pick my own first boyfriend, it like I think that like, you know, the it just didn't like mesh for her. And then
Mm.
I didn't know this until like right before we got married, apparently she said to my husband when I wasn't there, like it was totally normal. Like this was a super like casual, normal thing for her to say. That she had really begged and prayed that Jesus would come back for the rapture before I was old enough to start dating. But she guesses that he was the next best option. So like this was
Mm.
meant as like a compliment to him almost, but like basically she was saying that she hoped that I would die a virgin. Um
Wow.
which is like so fun. Um
What a mind
so
job.
yeah. So yeah, so there's a lot of shame with just original sin. There's a lot of shame and like purity culture and just like a lot of confusion. And then I think for me, maybe what I personally struggled with most, and this is not for everybody, is I think just because I am slash was socially awkward. And I was, you know, kind of a nerd and in a small town where there wasn't really an outlet for that. So I didn't fit in super well. I think that I kind of blamed that oh that's like a sin problem or like I'm a bad person and you know so that was also kind of like what I struggled with like that was proof that like oh I if I was more humble if I was more kind like that sort of thing then like it would have been better so yeah.
Mm. It's interesting as you're talking, it reminds me of just a general concept I've seen in a lot of stories, in that Christians who are really in it, like, and they're trying to get their kids really in it, uh, they don't seem to put the pieces together as to what certain dynamics will do long term in the sense of alienating their kids away from the worldview and the culture. Like, for example, what you just said, you know, they're making you feel like you should feel some kind of shame about the way that you're dating and the way that you're seeing the dating world, or that even the very fact that you want to get married, as opposed to just wait, you know, hopefully Jesus shows up soon and we don't have to worry about it. But the way that that puts you in such an awkward spot where you as a young person have to deal with this incredibly challenging dynamic in family or church, and yet you're expected to, if you're, I guess, super subservient, to just bow the knee and say, okay, I just agree with everything you say. I agree with it. I'll bow my knee. I'll be, you know, good little person, good little Christian, and I'll do everything you say. But most people don't work that way. Most people develop their autonomy. And it's another dynamic that I'm guessing is going to come up in your story, but comes up in a lot too, is poisoning the well of learning about science and evolution and things like that. And they're kind of trying in their minds to protect their kids from this horrible, you know, atheistic worldview. But in the same process, they know their kids are going to hear different things and see different things, and so they're not quite putting together the pieces that if you eventually force your kids into a life where there's kind of a double world, where you're like, I'm the good Christian that shows up on Sunday, I worship with my whole heart, I memorize the verses, I say what I need to do, I'm tithing, I'm doing all the right things, and you'd look at me and think, absolutely, they're showing up big for the Lord, and the Lord's doing good things in their hearts. And then you kind of go back home and you've got this private life, whether it's because you're, you know, looking at porn, or you're just questioning the narratives, or there's some other issue. And the more that Christians drive young people, especially, into two worlds where there's the church life and there's your private life that you really can't tell, or you're going to look bad, especially if you're trying to be in ministry or some kind of, you know, stage position. The more that you drive young people into two worlds where there's a facade, the more likely they are, in my opinion, to deconvert, because they recognize, number one, that if I've got this facade, probably some of the pastors and teachers do too. But also, it no longer feels like home. Like church doesn't feel like home anymore. My real home is my private life. My public church life is more like the, you know, where I need to look good and scrub up. But it doesn't actually feel very comfortable there. At some point, I want to kind of let my guard down and just be me. That's, in my opinion, not a great reason to deconvert per se. People should deconvert because Christianity actually isn't real, it's mythology. But most people don't start there. They start with just this church and these aren't my people anymore. And I think a lot of Christians are oblivious to that dynamic, that they are pushing people by droves into that dynamic, that the church is just not home anymore. And once
Yeah.
people cross that bridge, it's a lot easier to say, well, if if that's true, then what else have I been missing? What else is missing in this picture? And that's where they start to get into the bigger, truth claim questions. But does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. And I think that like 100% I agree with everything that you said. It was perhaps surprisingly not exactly my experience. I think it's a lot of people's experience. People see and hear that like I am a nuclear engineer, and so they're like, "Oh, she must have, learned science and like logicked her way out of these things," and that actually is not what happened. They did a very good job indoctrinating me. So like kudos. But so I was not taught evolution, and I took biology in high school, but I don't remember them talking about evolution. They might have, and I just like blocked it off, or they might have just like, gotten away without really talking about it because like it's just so socially acceptable to be anti-science. Um, and then when I went to college, like I took bio one, but nuclear engineering is not really biology heavy at all. And so really it was just like calculus, physics, and that sort of thing, which does shockingly little to turn anybody into a homosexual or a communist. So, my family now, all of them will tell me to my face that I've been brainwashed by higher education. And I'm just like, again, calculus. So like I my education, the 4 years that I was in college, did not shake my faith. Didn't.
Mm.
For the first 2 years in undergrad, I lived with a girl from my hometown, one of the only other people that like went to college. And we lived in an apartment together. And so that we were, again, just kept the same sort of milieu and culture. Like we reinforced each other's like faith. We found a church immediately, and our social group was this church that we went to, not campus activities and things. And again, I think that part of this comes back to me just being kind of socially awkward. Part of this comes down to, and this is like really one of my greatest regrets in life, was not being prepared, not really being prepared for that kind of independence and that broadening of horizons. Um, so I didn't take full advantage of, meeting people and like, broadening those horizons in undergrad. And then partially just like the fear that was like forced into me of like, you can't be friends with non-believers. They're going to either be a satanic worldly influence on you and like cause you to question your faith, or like if you are friends with those people, like basically it's nothing but an ulterior motive for you to be a light to like convert them. So that's all just very unpleasant. So we found like a church, and like that was our entire social circle. And then it wasn't until junior or senior year where my classes got very intense that my social group kind of shifted over to like a bunch of nuclear engineers. And um I'm probably like all over the place here, but one of the things that really in hindsight I look back on is like what helped you with, deconversion, deconstruction. I really prefer the term like de-indoctrination. Um,
Mm.
and there's many things, but the education helps. It helps with developing critical thinking, but it didn't shake my faith. I think one of the things that really helped was being in a new social environment where I belonged. Like I was in a group of like nerds, and I finally like really felt like I belonged there. And that is something that the church provides. You belong to the church, and if that's the only thing that you know that you belong in, you are terrified to leave and you won't leave because you think that there's nothing else. But because I had now experienced fitting in with a different group, and then when I came to the job that I'm in now, fitting in with in the Navy circles, I understood that there are the social aspect of the social and psychological, you know, coercion that like cults in place um, didn't have the same hold. So that was one thing. But yeah, I made it all the way through undergrad, still being like a biblical inerrancy, Bible believing, like Bible thumping, like totally unquestioning, totally indoctrinated all the way through undergrad.
That's
Um,
amazing. So
oh yeah, yeah.
what were some of the earliest seeds that eventually started to turn
Mhm.
those wheels though? Like what did get through?
I ultimately I deconstructed specifically on December 24th, 2021. So it's relatively recent. Post it was because of the pandemic and it was because of conspiracy theories. And looking
Hmm.
back, I can see that like there were seeds, like you said, that were planted. There were things that happened along the way, but they weren't the foundation shaking that eventually happened. They were just kind of like rumblings. My family, like I said, everybody that I grew up with was very fundamentalist, IBLP cult, like hyper patriarchy Christian, whatever. My family fell into that, but on the white Christian nationalist scale of things, I really think that my family personally was a little bit more white nationalist than like the hyper evangelicalism. They were
Hmm.
all of it, but very racist, and very like American exceptionalism, nationalism. Um, I didn't know any Democrats. Like we knew Republicans and Democrat was a slur. And we were basically told that like the Democrats are, you cannot be a true Christian and be a Democrat. And of course, I want to say around high school age when Obama became the president. And that was the first time that I really think I recognized conspiracy theories. The Obama birtherism conspiracy theory that he was not born an American citizen. My family 100% fell for that. I didn't know any better. I was not politically involved. I was not politically aware. I had no reason to question them, as I had no reason to question them with any of the rest of the stuff that they indoctrinated me with. And I remember being in school and like some kids talking about this and being actually informed and saying that like, oh, that's ridiculous. And I wasn't running around like debating people about this and saying like Obama wasn't born in this country, but I was just like, oh, I don't know, like, my dad said that he was born in Kenya. So and like that was kind of it. And then again, this is all in hindsight. My family's always had guns. I think. I don't really know when I was little. But after Obama became the president, and I think that this is really indicative of a much larger social shift for the whole country. We got an arsenal. All right. We had some guns and now we have lockers of guns. All right. They
Hmm.
went like borderline doomsday prepping. I knew one family from the church that I went to an undergrad who had an actual underground bunker in preparation for the biblical end times. And I
Wow.
went home and I want to say in college time frame, my mom has this like really nice walk-in pantry, and there was a 5 gallon bucket on the floor in the pantry, and I was looking for powdered sugar, and this is just like a fact that's burnt into my brain. And there's a 5 gallon bucket, and I look inside, and it's corn seed. And we're not farmers. Like they have a little bit of land, but not like it's not like farmland or anything. It's like on the coast of Florida. And and it was most upsetting because I immediately knew what it was. I didn't need to ask like a normal person wouldn't need to ask. I just knew that these were like apocalypse seeds. That these were here like just in case Obama declared himself to be the Muslim king of the United States and we needed to farm our land and like homestead to defend it from the communist lackeys. Um, and I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, like, are these apocalypse seeds? And her only response was like, so what if they are? So like really like end times rapture stuff slash political conspiracy theory stuff like melded together just like perfectly. And
With the
then
Can I ask with the guns, do you think they literally thought people were just gonna the government's gonna come try to take over their land?
yeah,
Uh, hmm.
um, yeah,
Like because they
they
were Christians mostly?
partially, yeah, all a part of kind of like end times, like that they're going to try to take your guns. not
Yeah.
necessarily your land, but maybe also your land when like the communists take over and you're not allowed to own property anymore. I don't really know that they thought super deeply about all of this stuff. They just heard it and were like, yep.
Yeah.
Um,
They just knew something really bad was coming and they wanted to try
yeah.
to defend themselves. It's amazing to me
Uh,
to think about that dynamic though, like the scariness of having, like you said, an arsenal of guns,
yeah.
locked and loaded, and just like, wow, like if you live in that mentality for long, I mean, it's number one, it's got to be difficult to live like that, thinking the end's coming any day now.
Mhm.
But just to live on that level of such, like you said, a conspiracy theory, I think if you really think it's true, like it starts to change your perspective on everything. And it's hard for me to imagine just what that mindset would be, but it scares me. It scares me to think about people where that's their bread and butter, that's their every thought. They're going to block out anybody that disagrees with them. They're just going to be like, that's the truth. And it's like you can't really argue with people like that at that point. They're just so far gone.
Mhm. And I mean it is actually terrifying. And I say that like I'm from a small town and like this is my family, so it's anecdotal evidence, but I think that the majority of people, like my husband, who was raised in a normal family, um, they don't realize that it is as widespread of a problem as it actually is. Like they think that this is a fringe issue and that this is like not that big of a deal, or these are just like some lunatics on the edge. But like this is a huge percentage of the United States population. And when you're talking about white Christian nationalism, there are statistics on this, and I would highly recommend books by Andrew Whitehead, who's a sociologist. He wrote Taking America Back for God. If you want to know what white Christian nationalism is, and like what these people believe, who they are, where they are, and how many of them there are, Taking America Back for God by Andrew Whitehead, and I want to say Samuel L. Perry, also The Flag and the Cross by Perry and Gorski. And Brad Onishi has his book Preparing for War. But the first two are like really sociological, like number studies and stuff. And they, depending on how you ask the question and like how you're measuring it, it's like the low estimates are like 30% of the United States population qualifies as a white Christian nationalist. And they're not all like, gun locker, underground bunker, doomsday preppers, but like they're
Yeah,
close.
yeah, that's how they
Um,
think. Do you ever get the concern in your heart too that some of this is not just that they're saying we want to defend our land when someone comes to be aggressive against us, but that they might be sort of wanting to form, maybe not that they could do it anytime soon, but like it's at some point, if the chips play out correctly, kind of form a militia and actually go not on the defensive but on the offensive. Be like, look, I've got 100 guns, oh you got 50, we can arm the whole damn neighborhood, with just a couple of us. We
mhm.
all agree on this, and all of a sudden you've got a small army of people saying we're going to take over. I mean, I know we kind of see it with the January 6th stuff, but I think, what if this is kind of like part of their hopeful expectation that at some point we're not going to be on the defensive, we're going to be in the offensive. And it goes along with the Christian message of like, Christ came the first time as a lamb, the next time he's coming as a lion. He's not coming to take sides, he's coming to take over.
Mhm.
And you kind of see this sense of like, we're in charge now, or we will be soon, you know.
Yeah, no, like, and definitely, like, we all saw January 6th, like, we saw this play out physically. And I think that that is definitely something to be worried about, that they openly fantasize about getting to, form these militias and things. And it's not just that they're worried about them coming for our guns or coming for our land. It's much deeper than that. It basically is just predicated on um, defending their worldview and their ideology, which is white Christian nationalism, white Christian supremacy, white supremacy, Christian patriarchy. And so if you are threatening that worldview, you are now the other. And they have just as much or more right and incentive to defend that worldview than they do to defend their lands or their guns. And eventually, and they talk about it in the books that I mentioned. Um, I forget the exact phrase, but like order, violence, and something. But basically, they get to defend what they say is order, law and order, and the correct order of things, by and they're justified to use violence in defending that. And I don't know that
Mm.
it's necessarily ever going to come to like January 6th, like more armed physical militias. I think what we have already seen and what the real danger is, and this isn't something that is like going to happen. This is something that has already happened and is happening, is the defending and the platforming of this supremacy of this ideology in politics in a way that affects people um, in their daily lives. Roe versus Wade, marriage equality that they're coming for, the attack on like contraception and um, all of these things. They're using that justification, like we are justified in defending the white Christian patriarchal supremacy, to destroy the separation of church and state and to implement this not physically violently, but in a way that is much harder to undo, and much more insidiously subtle. Like not everybody's paying attention to it, and they don't realize that like this is where these legislatures and bills and things are coming from. So
Yeah. And the word that comes to mind is theonomy, where they're trying to make it like the Ten Commandments or the rule of law and
yeah.
things like that, where it's not that they want to come to your door and shoot, aim a gun at you. They just want to make Christianity the law.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Back to your story, you're seeing this in your family and in your circle of friends, and at this point, that's what's starting the ball rolling of
Mm-hmm.
why does this look like a conspiracy theory, and why does Christianity, why is Christianity so woven into this? Is that kind of where it started?
Sort of. I wouldn't even say that it started. These are just things that like I think it's important to point out that like 2020, COVID, QAnon, these conspiracy theories and things, people are like, "Oh my God, where did this come from? This is so like all of the sudden." And it's not all of the sudden. It's been there for decades, for my entire life, and we just didn't recognize it for what it was. And things hadn't been brought to a head. So like this is always it's always been like this. The conspiracy theories have always been there. It's just that um Donald Trump uniquely united the religious right with the alt-right, kind of made it okay. And they've always been white supremacists, and they've always said and done these horrible things. But somehow, post Donald Trump, it just made it even more okay. Like I think the statistics on like hate crimes against Islamic people were worse in 2016 than they were after 9/11 in 2001, because Donald Trump just made it so okay to not just to be racist or to be like Islamophobic or like whatever it was, but he made it okay to openly endorse and enforce that supremacy of white Christian nationalism, you know? Um, but yeah, so like it was all still just like building up until 2020. And my best friend, Kathy, who I've been best friends since we were 12 years old, she was supposed to be visiting family in North Carolina. So she was driving from Florida to North Carolina. We were in South Carolina. She had planned to stay with us for a night or two as a free place to stay for months. She had asked to do this months in advance. She was driving through in July in 2020. So this is the first big summer spike of COVID. We had planned on this before COVID happened. And then once the pandemic set in, I told her, I was like, if you still need a free place to stay, like you're welcome to stay with us. But please understand that I'm an essential worker, which means that I am exposed to people at work every day. So there is an element of risk here. And, when people normally come to visit, like we do the whole tourist thing and we go out to all the restaurants and like we could do sightseeing and stuff. And like, obviously we're not going to be able to do that. We'll play some board games and like watch some movies or something. And she was like, yeah, that's fine. She came and she stayed. She gets out of her car, and the first thing that she says to me is, "Oh, do I need a face mask?" And I was like, yes. Like what? And she's like, oh, haha, this is the first time I've ever worn a face mask. And it was July. And I was just like, okay. And it's really hard to talk about this in hindsight because in hindsight, we know what the anti-vax movement was, the COVID denialist movement, the all the conspiracy theories and stuff. But at that point in time, this was the first time I'm seeing or hearing this. This is the first instance that I have encountered somebody who was like anti-mask, anti-whatever. And so I just thought it was like a weird comment and like we move on. And then she spends the rest of the weekend basically making fun of me and my now husband for taking COVID seriously. She's like low key kind of upset that we're not going out to a bunch of restaurants and things. And I was like, I literally told you before you showed up. And when she was so when I was an undergrad, she taught English in Taiwan through an IBLP program. So she was in Taiwan with a bunch of people who were like super IBLP. And her best friend from teaching English in Taiwan was this girl who was from California. And I had met her once. We like all took a trip together one time. And like she was nice, like I liked her. But this week I had like and recently I had seen that this California girl was posting all kinds of absolute insanity, talking about how these were end times and that Jesus was coming back imminently, and that if Trump didn't win the election, because this was in 2020, so right before 2021, that there was going to be a communist wave that overtook the United States, and she was talking about leaving the country and like moving to South America to escape the like communist takeover, and how face masks were child abuse and how face masks were slavery, and talking about like some stuff about 5G radiation, like stuff about like patriots, like did not, and again in hindsight you're like, oh okay, but in the moment, it was just like, oh, this is really weird. And I talked to Kathy about this. We talked about it. And Kathy's response was, oh, you don't believe in any conspiracy theories? And I was just like, I don't know how to answer that. Like Bigfoot? Like, was there a second shooter for JFK? Like, I don't know. Um, like it was just like a really weird response. And then she leaves. And I want to say this was around the 4th of July. So like that's the time frame. The next day, after she leaves, she sends me a voice message that literally changed my life. Like this was the trajectory shift moment. And she said, oh, because we'd been talking about conspiracy theories, like I thought you would think this is really interesting. Her best friend, another best friend, from the church that she went to in our hometown, and it's a small hometown. I know multiple families that go to this church. And she was like her best friend from the church that she goes to. It's more of a Pentecostal church, this one. A little bit more of the like dancing and like healings and that sort of thing. Her best friend thought that when the COVID vaccine came out, because it still was not out yet, it's going to be full of secret metal. The government's going to put secret metal in your COVID vaccine. And then 5G radiation is going to interact with the secret metal that's now in your blood to either control your mind and force you to vote Democrat or kill you. She wasn't sure which one. And I get this voice message and I'm like, oh my God, that's so funny. Like your friend read this crazy thing on the internet. That's hilarious. And she was like, no, 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 no. No, she believes this. She believes this. So I was just like, what is happening? And this was my best friend. She's my age. She's not like, and I saw some of the conspiracy theories and things growing up with the birtherism and then like some other stuff. And I just thought that like either my family, my parents, my pastors, like these people like know more about it than I do because I don't know anything about politics, or it's just not that big of a deal and they're just like boomers and they're old people and they just believe some crazy things and like whatever. It doesn't matter. But now Kathy is not a boomer. Kathy is my age and she's talking about 5G radiation mind control. And so basically this forced me to like tune in and be like, something is wrong. And I started watching her social media feeds and the things that she was sharing. She was like sharing some of the stuff that her California friend was sharing. And then I saw everyone, every single person in my hometown and in my community and in my life, every person sharing equally unhinged things. My friends' moms were sending me videos on like Facebook about like with like preachers at the pulpit talking about how the vaccine is going to be the mark of the beast and how George Soros is running a satanic cabal, and how they're like, trafficking child sex traffic victims and, uh, whatever. My mom is now sending me videos from Simone Gold and Judy Mikovits. I know Judy
Uh,
Mikovits was. Uh, why would you? Why, like it's best that you don't.
Probably.
Dr. Judy Mikovits was the research scientist that was platformed in the Plandemic documentary, which was a like anti-vax, anti-COVID conspiracy theory documentary. She's like famous for saying that face masks activate the virus. And I've since gone back and found other videos of her saying things that like, if you get the flu shot, you'll die within 10 minutes. If you ride in an airplane, you'll get radiation poisoning. Things that are just like flatly, like completely discrediting. But she was in this documentary. It had like 8+ million views. It was a huge vector point for like anti-COVID conspiracy theories. And then Dr. Judy Mikovits, oh, sorry, Dr. Simone Gold, um, she was the woman who started America's Frontline Doctors Association, which was famous in the early pandemic for gathering a whole bunch of doctors on the steps of like the Capitol building or something to have a press conference. Basically, she started the hydroxychloroquine conspiracy theory, saying that the government is hiding the cure from COVID from you, and that it's this antiviral malaria drug, and that conveniently her group was selling it. And all the doctors that she had like gotten to sign on to this big statement to like share with the world, a lot of them had like expired or lost licenses. A bunch of them were just chiropractors. One woman was a doctor, but she was also like the preacher for a church where she taught people that disease was not caused by germs and viruses, but it was caused by having sex with demons in your sleep. And so like this is the group of people who are sharing this information. And my mom is sending me videos from these people saying that, and they are, my mom and my parents were stockpiling hydroxychloroquine. Now they found some quack doctor to give them a prescription. My father has one lung. My dad is like over 65 years old, is a cancer survivor, and has one lung. One of them is permanently collapsed. And so he was the definition of high risk. And instead of taking the pandemic seriously, my family was stockpiling hydroxychloroquine and vitamin D. So, and I'm not in Florida with them. I'm, in a different state. I'm not sure what's going on down there. I'm seeing them like sending me all these conspiracy theory videos. All of my friends and my friends' parents and like my teachers and my preachers and literally every single person in my hometown are sharing equally rabid, just like nonsense. And I was the only person who was saying, like, wait a minute. Unfortunately, the weekend after Kathy came to visit, my now husband proposed. So then we were planning our wedding during all of this. And the first thing that I did, because it was one of the things that I was like literally the most excited about, and like I was not ever one of those girls who like planned their wedding from birth, like my roommate in college used to ask for like wedding magazines as birthday presents because she was just like so obsessed with like her 1 day wedding. I never did any of that. But one of the things I was most excited about was to see all of my friends as bridesmaids, and to have the bridesmaids, because like I have friends from undergrad who lived across the country and friends from back home who I don't live with anymore, and like get to see everybody together again. And of course, we didn't do best man maid of honor, but the unofficial maid of honor was Kathy, and I asked her to be a bridesmaid like immediately. And We're trying to plan our wedding during the pandemic while all this conspiracy theory stuff is happening. And we didn't know that we were going to get to have a wedding for a very long time. Like a lot of people had to cancel their weddings, do Facebook Live weddings, like all of this stuff. And we weren't ever sure we were going to get to do one. And then we just happened to time it so perfectly that like, what was it? Delta was like at its lowest point. The vaccines were out, and we thought at the time that they were like 98% effective or something. And Omicron hadn't started yet. So we thought the pandemic was going away. The vaccines were 98% effective. We made sure to have the wedding outdoors, and not to have like a ton of people. So we felt comfortable having the wedding. And um, not very many people from my hometown were really invited. So everybody that was coming was pretty much going to be vaccinated, except the people from my hometown. And none of my older relatives were coming. So everybody there was going to be like 30 or under, except for my parents. And I told my parents um, that I understand that the risk is still very low, but I cannot, in good conscience, have a party with and have a bunch of people around dad when he is so high risk. Like I would never be able to live with myself if something bad happened, knowing that there was something else we could have done. Like there were precautions we could have taken and we just didn't. So I told them that I was like, we're not mandating that all of the guests get vaccinated because like 95% are going to be vaccinated on their own anyway. But you have to be vaccinated. Like my parents have to be vaccinated. You're going to be the only old people there. And my mom told me to just elope. She was just like, just cancel the wedding then. Um, and we hadn't put any like deposits down or
Wow.
anything at this point, but um,
Like they just weren't
yeah,
going to get vaccinated under any
yeah,
circumstances.
yeah. She was just like, well, and it was just because of the vaccine. She was like, well, then you should just elope. And I was like, nope, no, 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 no. And thankfully, my dad did not want to get vaccinated, did not think that he needed to get vaccinated, was very against this, but he did recognize that it was important to me and that it was going to be very bad if my mom canceled the wedding over vaccines and things. So he spent 3 days convincing her to like get the vaccine, which they eventually did. Um, and we did have the wedding, but as you can, oh, and then during all of this, I'm trying to learn about like why they're talking about 5G radiation and end times and microchips and George Soros and all of these things. And eventually I figure out that to call it QAnon. And I was like, oh, there's this conspiracy theory that is kind of an umbrella conspiracy theory that a lot of people are getting wrapped up into. And the core of the conspiracy theory is that there's a satanic cabal of elites, billionaire elites, who are running massive rings of hundreds of thousands of children of sex slaves, like all over the world, and that they are influencing governments and economies to drive the world towards like a one world order kind of thing. And this is very reminiscent of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a Hitler era anti-Semitic conspiracy theory of a global cabal of satanic elites who are Jewish, like pulling the strings of global governments and whatever. And it's very similar to Flat Earth, which is a global cabal of satanic elites who are pulling the strings. And so like basically every major conspiracy theory follows this like inherently anti-Semitic pattern. But QAnon started on 8chan and 4chan, which are these like super nerd message boards that my family, who are a bunch of Florida rednecks, have never even remotely heard of. Like they don't even know what Reddit is. So how are they falling for QAnon, which is coming from like the dark web? And it's because it basically like fed into the evangelical narrative of like good and bad. And like there are literally QAnon Q drops of Bible verses. Like they were using Christian language and like saying that this is end times. And when this moved off of those message boards into like Reddit and then Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, these mainstream platforms. They used the summer of 2020, which is exactly when the conspiracy theories hit me, a campaign of hashtag Save the Children, which was a like child sex trafficking, misinformation, moral panic, when all of America was kind of looking at Black Lives Matter. You had all of these like Christian and Mormon mommy bloggers who wanted to feel like moral crusaders, but couldn't get behind Black Lives Matter because of racism. And so, what's more important than racism? Child sex trafficking. And so they jumped onto these like the Wayfair shipping conspiracy that like Wayfair was shipping children in cabinets, and all of this other like misinformation around child sex trafficking massively blew up this conspiracy theory. And then with all of that came the rest of QAnon, this idea of satanic cabals and Bill Gates like putting microchips in vaccines, and this narrative that aligned perfectly with the evangelical worldview, that like the worldly culture is satanic and should be resisted, and like the worldly culture or Democrats are telling you to get vaccines, then that must be bad. And so I went to everybody in my life and in my family, the three bridesmaids who were from my hometown, my immediate family. And I was like, oh, this is what QAnon is. I want to pre-warn you about it because you're going to start to see it. I don't know why, but all of the white evangelicals are the people who are falling for these conspiracy theories, and it doesn't make any sense. I just want to warn you about it. And Kathy was just like, super far gone. She was like, I can't believe you don't believe in child sex trafficking. And that's not what I'm saying. These are very real and serious issues, but the conspiracy theories were spreading misinformation about these things to the point where actual charities and law enforcement were having to come out with statements condemning QAnon and Wayfair shipping conspiracy theories because they were being inundated with false claims and reports to the point where the systems were being overloaded. So it was actually harming legitimate organizations. And so she was like, I can't believe you don't believe in child sex trafficking. And then my other bridesmaids had already like fallen for it. The one believed that like Oprah Winfrey was a pedophile, and she believed the Wayfair shipping conspiracy. And then the other one, she was like, oh, I already know about all of this because her aunt, who was a person that I've known my entire life, had gone hard pilled on QAnon. She had, they couldn't get her off the computer. She was like obsessed with like research, doing her own research. And she had told my bridesmaid that all of the hurricanes that hit Florida in 2020 were man-made by Jewish space lasers with the intent of sinking the state of Florida because DeSantis had given them too much freedom. So I had just like barely scratched the surface of like talking to people and trying to figure out what's going on, and immediately found like the most rabid form of anti-Semitism that you could possibly find, and like the worst conspiracy theories and like space lasers, right? And I had to uninvite Kathy from our wedding. I was like, please just don't show up. The day of the wedding, instead of worrying about like the placements or the color of the spoons or whatever, I'm worried that somebody's going to start talking about Jewish space lasers to my in-laws, So like on top of the pandemic concerns. So like it was just all very just insane. And then
Mm.
immediately after the wedding, and it was Christmas. We got married in October. We went to see my husband's family for Christmas, and I feel really, really bad because we were going to his sister's house. She had a new house. She had a new baby. It was like she was hosting Christmas for the first time. It was like this big deal. I'm having an existential crisis. I am just like losing my mind because I'd had throughout the wedding, aside from Kathy, I had just been so focused on don't burn every bridge. You must not understand what's going on. It can't possibly be this bad. Just get through the wedding. Don't burn every bridge. And then I had just enough space after the wedding at Christmas to be like, oh no, like it is actually this bad. Like something is deeply, deeply, deeply wrong. And I got two text messages from people who do not know each other. One is a friend from work, one is a friend from undergrad. And they both texted me almost verbatim the same text message saying, because they knew that I knew about the conspiracy theories, they were like, help, I'm home for Christmas. My dad is talking about some crazy QAnon stuff. Like, what do I do? Like the booster shot is the mark of the beast, like that kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't know. I'm so sorry because like if they're already that far in, I've been trying to talk to people for like almost 2 years at this point, and I have been largely unsuccessful. And I can tell you what is going on and what they believe, but I can't tell you how to get them out of it. And it basically was like a snapping point. Like I felt an almost physical snap of it. I knew that this was affecting other people, but then to finally see it affecting other people felt supremely unfair. And I looked around at all of those bridges that I had tried not to burn and realized that they were already burnt, just not from my end. Like they had carried on happily with all of their crazy conspiracy theories and like irrationality and just deeply irresponsible and with no regard for anybody but themselves and their worldview. There was nothing left to save. Like those relationships were gone. It was almost like
Mm.
they had died, and I was no like I had completely lost all respect for all of the people, my family, my parents, the my friends' parents, these people who were supposed to be like elders in my community. Um, and I don't think that most people maybe realize how tied how deeply tied the like your beliefs are to the social connections, which is why I really
Yeah.
like Margaret Singer's like definition or term for cults, which is like social and psychological control programs, because there's a huge social aspect of it. And once I lost respect for all of those people, if they've been so wrong about things that are so obvious, like what else could they be wrong about at that moment? I would not have said, "Oh, I'm an atheist now." Like, "Oh, I like, I don't believe in God anymore." But something broke. The indoctrination broke, and I was able to say, "Oh, I need to look at this." Like, it's not that like all the evangelicals are falling for these conspiracy theories. It's that these people are falling for these conspiracy theories because they are white evangelicals. And it took me about a year of just being completely lost, feeling completely adrift, not having the language of deconstruction or ex-evangelical to kind of ground me and to find resources, to find shows like this that you have. Um, but it was social media, like TikTok initially, where I did find some of those voices. First is just like making jokes. And I was like, oh my God, some people think the same thing that I think. And then finding the book recommendations and finding the language and finding shows like this, I, voraciously read everything I could find, starting with purity culture because I knew that something was wrong with purity culture because it personally affected me. And then from there, with Jesus and John Wayne by Christian Cobes Dumes, finding the white supremacy element of it, and like realizing that my entire knowledge base was built on a lie and that I had been lied to and that I knew nothing about actual American history. We are not an exceptional country built on Judeo-Christian principles and blessed by God for our Judeo-Christian principles. We are built on like slavery and segregation and Native American boarding schools and like really awful Asian immigration bans and like all sorts of things. And from there, uh, eventually, and what really I think pushed me to the point of saying like, okay, I'm an atheist, and even today, like I would say that I'm an agnostic. You know, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. I would definitely say it's not the Christian God. So in some contexts, you could call me an anti-theist. In most contexts, I think you could call me an agnostic, an existentialist. In some contexts, you could still call me a Christian. But what really pushed me to finally that point was researching and understanding cults and thought reform and these social and psychological control programs, and being able to identify what I had gone through as indoctrination. And really, all of this hinged on and started with conspiracy theories, and also reading a bunch of books about like why do people believe conspiracy theories. And most of the books that you'll
Mm.
read on this, so like Suspicious Minds by Rob Brotherton, or Conspiracy by Michael Shermer, or American Conspiracy Theories by Josephine Usinski, or I really love Richard Hofstadter, who's an American historian. He wrote The Paranoid Style in American Politics. Really love Richard Hofstadter. Um, Most of these are going to be focused on just like logical fallacies and you know, things that would apply to flat earthers and Bigfooters and 9/11 truthers and like all of this. But what was happening with QAnon and what was happening with the people in my life and what I had been through was something much bigger than that. It wasn't just a conspiracy theory, it was a much larger worldview. And what I have kind of learned to call it is I think that we need to shift the discussion away from conspiracy theories and cults and more towards moral panics, which are much larger, ambiguous, and totalistic ideologies. Depending on how you define the words. Because, like white Christian
Mm.
nationalism and white evangelicalism, there is no central charismatic figure. There's no Jim Jones, right? But it is a totalistic ideology, and they do implement the thought reform, manipulative, unethical thought reform tactics that cults
Yeah.
use. And when you have a totalistic ideology, you view the world through a very specific lens. Um, it produces what Robert J. Lifton calls personal closure, or Dr. Janja Lalich calls bounded choice. And you only have certain options to choose from that align with your worldview. And so um, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy who wrote like Sherlock Holmes, has a quote where he says, once you have eliminated all of the impossible options, whatever is left, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. And when you have this, like these blinders on and this totalistic ideology, you've eliminated a good chunk of reality as impossible because it's not aligning with your like pre-accepted bias of your pre-accepted worldview. And so whatever's left, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. So why did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? It can't be because the majority of Americans don't want to live in a misogynistic theocracy. That's not one of the bounded choices. It must be because either white evangelicals were not strong and righteous enough and God abandoned them, or there was satanic evil tampering. Like those are the only bounded choices that you're left with. And so when you have this
Mm.
cultic mindset and these totalistic ideologies, conspiracy theories are completely inevitable. The Venn diagram is one circle. There, when you're talking about cult psychology, you are talking about conspiracy theory psychology, and it's much bigger than just Bigfoot, right? It's much more closely tied to historical political movements like fascist totalitarian movements. And Robert J. Lifton, who's kind of like the one of the biggest first names in like cult psychology studies. Um, his book, one of his books, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, is him studying people who had been removed from the Chinese communist and thought reform prisons, like prisoners of war, and like the thought reform schools that the Chinese nationals had been forced to attend. So the political totalitarian cult totalistic ideology conspiracy theory overlap is all one aspect.
So at this point, you've at some point here in the last in the last 2 years,
Mhm.
you basically said I'm out. When did you first make that public? Like, not that you don't buy into Kanan, but you don't believe in the biblical worldview. When did you first come out to people and talk about that? And what's the response been as you've done that?
Um, so with people in like my personal life, um, I've talked to a few people. My like most recently, my brother just at this Christmas. Um, I'm not like afraid or ashamed to tell them, but I might be in a kind of unique situation because I feel like I've already lost those relationships. Like I'll go home for Christmas, but like I'm not looking forward to it. And they it's more for them than it is for me. And so for the most part, they just don't want to engage. They don't ask, and so it doesn't come up. But um publicly on like social media and things, um I have like my Instagram for my book project, and that started. And again, like it wasn't just like, oh, I'm an atheist now. Like, oh, I like it took a while for me to find like ways to break out of like biblical inerrancy and things. Like I had to learn. So it was a little bit gradual, but um the whole book started like maybe started like February of 2022, like right after that Christmas, thinking like, oh, I'll make a PowerPoint or I'll write an essay and I can give it to my family and just be like, this is what QAnon is, this is what conspiracy theories are, this is why you shouldn't be taking ivermectin. And it very quickly morphed into something much, much bigger. And as I was learning and reading, it evolved into like a book. And then I started the Instagram account, I want to say like October of 2022. And, so I've always been like fairly public about all of it. I just haven't, it took me a while to get there.
Yeah. But for the
And
people
I'm
that do like dig into it with you, do they just think you're horrible? Do they shun you at all, or like what are any of the conversations like?
it's really just kind of gone no contact with a lot of people. And that was all
Okay.
on from my end as well, just because I couldn't watch my friends like not vaccinate their children for measles. I was just like, I can't, it hurts me too much. And I can't, I went home for Christmas this last, a couple months ago, and we're going to a Taylor Swift concert. And I was like, oh, we're going to a Taylor Swift concert. And like, they waited until I walked away, and I heard somebody say that like, oh, well, Taylor Swift is a Satan worshiper and she's tricking all of her fans into practicing witchcraft at her concerts, right? So like, it's just like I don't want to be around that. But I am I started this book to give to my family so that they, even if they don't agree with me, they can at least understand me. And it has really turned into something that has helped me and really helped to like organize my thoughts and things. But I'm pretty much waiting until it's done to give it to all of them, because I, for 2 years leading up to the wedding, spent so much time like as I was learning, having these partial conversations about like, oh, this is wrong because of this is wrong because of this, but not like the big picture. And like when you have these, just one topic or one comment kind of conversations, it's very easy for them to just like gloss over it or to like move past it and like think that that's not a big deal. So I'm waiting until the book is done, until I have like a complete whole argument and then I'm gonna be, whether they never talk to me again or not, at this point I don't really care. But um, yeah, so some people know. My brother, I had a very long conversation with him. He knows. He, I think if it had been 2 years prior, like during the pandemic, he would have not listened and would have just told me that I've been brainwashed by higher education. They think that I've been led astray and that I've been tricked and fooled. Not that necessarily they say that I'm like a horrible, evil person. Like not from people in my immediate life have I heard that. But they do think that I've been fooled. And
Yeah. Hmm.
so, yeah.
I'm thinking with the timing of your book, if you wait just a little bit longer with this next election here in November, you'll probably have some more fodder to weed through. But I feel like we've scratched the surface, and I know we're out of time, but I feel like we've scratched the surface. So I'd love to do it again sometime, maybe for sure, if not before. If you could for sure reach out when your book is ready, because I would love to help put that on blast when the time is right, because it's so necessary. And it's I just want to add this real quick thought, and then I'll pass the ball back to you to maybe give us a final thought from your side. But one of the things that's always interesting to me when we talk about conspiracy theories, and I know there's these things like Kanan it's on all of our minds, but it's ironic that I think we should also be thinking, maybe talking about it this way, but at least thinking of Christianity as a conspiracy theory, like
Mhm.
not Christianity in terms of what it's doing culturally today, but that the original early Christianity started as a conspiracy theory. Oh, did you hear so and so rose from the dead? You're so and so Koboko Mater. And it was all hearsay. It was all somebody writing a book in a novel. And we know there's enough academics to know where they got these stories from. We know they copied so many of them from the Greco-Roman mystery cults and the pantheons, from the Homeric epics, from other sources, from Jewish mimicists with copying Old Testament stories. We know where they came up with these stories from to make the Jesus character. But at some point, we also know somebody said these aren't stories. This is history. And so they're just coming up, turning a mythology into an actual history. And so Christianity itself is a conspiracy theory at its core. And so when you think to yourself, why are these Christians today so willing, so able to be the suckers in the room for Christianity or for these other conspiracy theories? It's like you realize their whole worldview is a conspiracy theory. And they've never had the tools to simply figure out one basic question: what is real and what is fantasy? What is a delusion and what is reality? They can't figure that out because their whole worldview is based on a fantasy. Therefore, it's not that far of a stretch to think you're going to get suckered into some others along the way, most likely.
Mhm.
Or at least for sure, some variation of a theme of Christianity where you just, for a lot of us, for me, for example, it was that angels and demons are fighting in the room around you, the
Yeah.
whole Frank Peretti stuff. But you do get that picture that once you go down this road, like once you've really heavily deceived, for a lot of people, like if you mentioned the word, there are a lot, their relationships are lost. For some of these people, we sadly think they're probably not going to ever get out. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't still try. I mean, I was in it to win it, and I got out. It took me many, many decades, but it's like it breaks your heart because you might never get those people back. They may never truly live a day of their real lives.
Mhm.
But it also helps us, I think, to ground ourselves more in our worldview scenario, to think, number one, what happened? Like just the whole Stockholm syndrome. Why was I in love with my captor? Why did I
Yeah.
love the Yahweh character when he's such a psychopath? But then also, I think, to maybe to your point of the book and other things you're thinking through, to say, if I got so deceived in this area for so long, is it possible I'm deceived in another area that I haven't addressed yet? And to say the issue is not necessarily to look at the topics, it's to look at the whole filter. Like, how do I get down to the lower level of this and say,
Mhm.
don't address Christianity, don't address Kanan. The question is, how do I think through what's true and what's false? How do I verify a claim? How do I falsify a claim? To really get down to critical thinking, and
Mhm.
and skepticism. And once you do that, I think the tools in that toolbox begin to help you, yes, to heal from Christianity, but also to address other things in our lives that are obviously, at that point, also very critical to keep thinking through, because
Mhm.
we don't want to escape Christianity and then end up still in some nasty, falsehood for the rest of our lives. We want to keep on examining our minds. And I
Mhm.
think I think it's great that what you're doing. I think it's awesome. So, having said all that, I'll pass the ball to you to any final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, everything you just said is like there's so much there. Just I think it's important to view white Christian nationalism, cults, conspiracy theories, whatever, with the understanding that basically conspiracy theories are just a way of explaining phenomenon and events through a totalistic perspective. And something that they are very good at is um, basically just like alternative explanations for things, and or almost kind of like a straw man argument. And once you see one of those straw man arguments as an alternative false explanation, it's a lot easier to be like to see it in other places as well. The whole white evangelical nationalist uh ideology built on this like individualistic bootstraps American mentality of oh, if somebody is struggling or impoverished, it's because they have some sort of moral failing and they're not trying hard enough, when in reality, that's an alternative explanation. When hiding like true American history, generational wealth due to slavery, segregation, mass incarceration, like whatever. So understanding that these like alternative explanations are just kind of conspiracy theories, and really understanding like how pervasive and the Christian privileges and the white like how influential white Christian nationalism is, where things are normalized in such a way that like we never question it. We don't see it as white Christian nationalism. We just see it as like what's normal. And like, you know, once you see one of these things for what it is, following that, you know, knocking that domino down into the rest of them. Um, and I genuinely think that it's really important there's no like widespread education on this, I don't think. Understanding cults and understanding not just like, you know, listening to podcasts like Cults by Parcast. It's a great podcast, where you hear these horrible stories about like, you know, mass suicides and things, but really studying like the mechanisms of thought control, loading the language, mystic manipulation, you know, all of, like how these groups indoctrinate people, because once you see it in one group, you can see that it applies to the rest. Um, as an evangelical, we looked down so heavily on Islam, for example, for being like so misogynistic and so like cruel, um, with like whatever, and then like looking down on like Mormonism for being so ludicrous and being so like ridiculous. Who could possibly believe that these must be cults? But then seeing your beliefs as the conspiracy theories that they actually are, and realizing that evangelicalism was just as cruel and backs up these horrendous systems of patriarchy and like white supremacy and things, just as cruel as any other group and just as ludicrous as any other group. QAnon really blasted that one out of the water for us. You have a much harder time cult hopping. You know, it's very common for people who come out of these totalistic beliefs to just kind of like find another one or find a softer version of it. But like if you really look into it and see the commonalities, I think that it inevitably leads you to a much more agnostic atheist position.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would just like to plug. I'm most active on Instagram at taking off the tinfoil hat with a period in between each word. And my website, takingoffthe tinfoilhat.com, has a resource page. This is really like the thing that I most like want to share with people. I have a reading list broken down by topic for, it's not quite up to date, but everything that I have read through my deconstruction. As I said, I like voraciously read for, you know, years now, about white supremacy, about conspiracy theories, about totalism, and all of those references with podcasts and even some music and stuff is available at takingoffthe tinfoilhat.com.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Well, I'll also have the links for all that beneath this video, and I'll also try to go through all those books you mentioned throughout the interview. I'll try to have the Amazon links if anyone wants to go directly to those and get those. But this is awesome. I love it. I love what you're doing. I think it's so critical, and I love how, like you said, once you really understand this, it's eventually it's hard to get suckered again. It's like your spidey senses just go up, and your bull. Someone else said, you know, your bullshit meter starts to get really sensitive. You realize when you've been suckered, and once you've been suckered horrifically, and then you see it a second time, like I can see I'm actually in danger of being suckered a second time with this, maybe like where you've gone from evangelicalism to liberal Christianity, where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it seemed like it was better, but when I look at it, it's actually just it's a variation on the theme. We're still espousing a cult here, and you eventually do get out of it all the way. You get to the point where you're like, if I'm ever going to just dive headfirst and really give my heart and mind and life to something, I'm going to have a lot of evidence. And that's the golden ticket is there evidence for what you're claiming, and how do you evaluate the evidence? Is it just hearsay, or, you know, is it the community pressure? I love that. It's almost like I love that word primer. It's like we get a primer for how to evaluate reality. And so many of us, in my opinion, did not get that in Christianity. Like there were these givens of like, yes, you can evaluate scripture. Is this the right interpretation of scripture? Is this theologian a good theologian, or are they mixing some things that they shouldn't? You discern things, but there's always this box of givens, and of course, the biggest given is that our God is real, our Bible is inerrant, and our Bible's from that God who is real, and Christian, and that Jesus really did die for your sins, and that was critical to accept that. Once you get to a point where you're like, I'm okay looking at the deepest givens and questioning them. At that point, to me, your mind is truly beginning to be free, and that's a beautiful thing. I think that's why so many people will confess when they share their stories that they had so much peace after deconversion compared to Christianity, not just because that they actually had peace, but because they realized, not just that this whole setup of Yahweh and you love Yahweh back where he's going to get you, that's not real. That pressure's off. And when you're having sex, he's not watching you. He's not looking in your mind and doing the celestial North Korea stuff. That's peaceful, but it's also peaceful just to realize I got my life back. I got my mind back, at least hopefully a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I got a chance to evaluate things for real, and the peace to say, wow, like what a mind job. And again, I go back a lot to that whole captor concept, but like we were in love with our captor. Why? Why were we in love with our captor? He was so bad to us. Why did we call him a good father when he wasn't? And once you have this freedom, you're like, okay, yes, I've got the freedom from the belief system, but I've also got the freedom to think for the first time. And I love it. It's going back to basics. It's stuff we should have easily, very arguably had in childhood. We didn't, but we're playing catch up and doing the best we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
I would, and that was a huge thing for me because of the conspiracy theories, to say how close I came to not deconstructing. If it had not been for a global pandemic of like historic proportions, I could have extremely easily lived my entire life, just another 40, 50 years, and died being an evangelical, being indoctrinated. And I'm extremely grateful, I don't know to who, to have had the chance to break away from that. And also it has played, it's kind of like Inception. It has also played into my deconstruction, because if you were a Bible-believing Christian who believes in hell and penal substitutionary atonement and all of that, as somebody who has had a metanoia, which is like the word that Jesus uses for repentance, it really means like a paradigm shift. As somebody who's had a paradigm shift, I understand how easy and how close I came to not having that conversion, basically. So to say that people deserve eternal damnation and eternal conscious torment for not having some conversion or metanoia process becomes increasingly ridiculous, because like I can see and say like how close I came to not having this opportunity. So
it is amazing. It's amazing I joke a lot with people. When you look back at what we used to believe and how the world used to work in our minds, it's staggering. Everything from all this heavier stuff we've talked about to just the simple thing is like, I believed God liked to cut off little boys' penises, and he likes us to go to church and pretend to eat his dead son's body and blood. It's like, what were we in? What the hell were we thinking? But glad we escaped. Anyway, well, I will definitely, again, want to follow up with you, especially as your book takes off. But I'll just say thank you so much for sharing your story today. And we've been speaking, everyone, with Sinaine Shea. Sinaine, thank you so much. Great to get to know you. Great to hear your story.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Have a great day.